We are now officially live.
Okay, hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining us today again. We will continue with the study of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta with Venerable Dhamma, who is joining us from Sri Lanka in the meditation center. And after we study the text for 1 hour, we will have a Q&A and discussion. Before we start with our session, we will begin by taking refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha and accept the 5 precepts together. We do this every week to prepare our minds for studying the Dhamma and to remind ourselves of the basic principles of morality. Is there someone in the reading group who would like to lead the recitation today?
Yeah.
Yes, Austin, thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Ahang bante isaranena aha pancha ilani dachami. Tutiyampi ahang bante isaranena aha pancha ilani dachami. Tatiyampi ahang bante isaranena silani yachami.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhan saranam gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammam saranam gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sangham saranam gacchami.
Tutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tutiyampi buddhan saranam gacchami.
Tutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tutiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami.
Tutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tutiyampi sangham saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhan saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sangham saranam gacchami.
Isarnagamanang nititang
Amabante.
arnatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata veramani sikhapadan samadhiyami.
Adinna dana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinna dana veramani sikhapadan samadhiyami.
Kamesu micchācara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamesu micchācara veramani sikhapadan samadhiyami.
Musāvāda veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Savada veramani sikhapadan samadhiyami.
Surameraya majjapamada dhāna veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Sura Meraya Majja Madhathana Veramani Sikkhapadan Samadhiyami.
Imani pancha sikkhapadani silena sugating yanti silena bhoga sampada silena nibbutaṃ yanti tasma silaṃ visodhanye.
Uh, uh, uh,
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So before we get into our reading for today, please remember to have the orientation of about 2 paragraphs for each reader. And when reading, take your time and read slowly and carefully. And please leave a pause between each paragraph. Feel free to ask questions during these pauses. If you are in the audience and want to be in the reading group, if you have done at least the at-home course, please send a request to us. We are currently on page 137 on the PDF, 127 on the physical page, and it's still the topic of the story. A Brahma finds delight in a pig's pen, and we start with the paragraph, "It is a matter for gratification." Right, the reading order, we go by alphabetical order. I will write it in the chat, but for the first person, you would be the starter, Austin.
thank you. It is a matter for gratification that she became a Brahma after being a princess by virtue of her jhanic attainments. It is gratifying too that from the Brahma world, she was reborn in the human world in a wealthy family. To know that she left behind her family, friends, and possessions reluctantly to be reborn as a soul. It is really awful to think of descending to the human plane from the Brahma world and then to sink further still into the animal kingdom as a pig. This should be enough to excite alarm and religious emotion, because so long as the noble path has not been established, anyone is liable to land in the lower realms. It is with the intention of arousing religious emotion and exhorting the bhikkhus to practice the Dhamma in all earnestness that the Blessed One told them the account of the female hen's succession of existences.
So to recap, if you've forgotten, this is the story of this woman, story of this pig. The Buddha was walking with Ananda, and he saw a pig on the side of the road, and the Buddha smiled, realizing that this was a former Brahma, god, who, having died from the Brahma realm, was born as a human. Being a human, did nothing good, and so was further born as a pig. Later on, ended up becoming a human again, and becoming a bhikkhuni, I think. Oh no, not a bhikkhuni. Yes, eventually becoming a bhikkhuni and supposed to have becoming a sotapanna or an arahant. This is the section on stories about past lives, future lives, about how craving, we're on the second noble truth, or thirst, tanha, is bono bhavika, creates further becoming. Remember we've been through tatra tatra abhinandini, how thirst leads to delight here or there, like a dung beetle will delight as a dung beetle in dung, in feces. And now we're on to the question of how it leads to rebirth. And so we have some example stories that we have in the text, and then he's going to soon talk about stories that he heard himself in Myanmar from lay people and people whose children remembered past lives, that sort of thing.
Without mindfulness also, is it possible for the mind to have some inkling of remembrance at least? Otherwise, all these births seem like an utter waste of experience. I mean, it's like quite scary in that sense.
Well, I mean, it is ultimately a waste because there's no point to it, but that's only true if you're, well, I mean, it is true, but it requires an understanding of the pointlessness of samsara in general. It requires one to have had enough of samsara.
Thank you, Bhante.
I mean, to me, this is a very good way to have that this passion towards being reborn. No, if you start to remember all these lives and all this nonsensical wheels of existences again, being reborn, dying, reborn again, all in all different places, this can bring disillusionment and
I'm not sure about that. I mean, you obviously have that impression because you practice mindfulness, but I think to the few people who have talked to me about past lives, it doesn't seem to be that way at all. They don't seem to be especially spiritual or deeply wise or dispassionate about reality. I think often they are excited by it. It's something, it can even be a source of pride that they're able to remember their past lives. I don't think it's all that powerful necessarily. I think it still very much depends on the person. What I have heard has a strong impact is when people die and then come back to life, having remembered something while they were dead. So having near-death experiences, that I've heard changes people pretty profoundly. But still, actually, no. I mean, I met one guy when I was in Hamilton, the monastery in Hamilton where you visited. Before they bought the back lot, the house on the back lot, it was owned by some random individual. And I went up to the fence one day when he was standing there and we started talking, and he told me, "Oh, I'm not afraid of death because I died once." And he told me about his near-death experience, and he said it completely changed him. So that's an example that I was thinking of, but he didn't seem all that spiritual. I mean, he was. It had changed him in a good way, I think, but I don't see that he did anything with it. Certainly didn't take up the practice of meditation. I think it can make you complacent as well. He thought that he had nothing to be afraid of, so he was kind of complacent about it. See, if you've got wrong view, you take everything the wrong way, and knowledge of past lives isn't a part of the actual path, so it doesn't have the capacity to inherently create wisdom. Remember, wisdom is completely based on seeing the three characteristics in experience, in momentary experience. This is all, past lives is all conceptual. It doesn't have any actual basis in reality, and it can give you a broader perspective, but many things can do that, and it's really what you do with it. I think, yes, positive, generally positive, but not deeply so. I don't think it's a negative thing. I don't want to say that people become proud because of it, but if someone is prone to pride, they can still be proud about past life memories, and they're prone to attachment, they can still be attached and angry and afraid and all this.
I mean, for me, this story kind of reminds me of the enlightenment of Gautama Buddha, no? Like, he also, I mean, the first experience was he remembering all his previous existences. So in that sense, and like, if that's one type of practice, it could be very useful, no?
I thought of that actually when you said that was the first thing I thought about when asking myself if I agreed. And I mean, he was the bodhisattva. It goes without saying that he was ready. That was sort of why I answered the way I did, is because if you're the sort of person to appreciate it, it can be a very valuable experience. But you have to be that sort of person already. And the experience that I've had just doesn't accord with that. I mean, generally but you can lump everything into that. Like, any spiritual experience is generally beneficial. Like, if someone enters into the jhanas, people who enter into the jhanas will emphatically insist that it's a great support for enlightenment. But sure, it's positive. But if you're proud, you can be proud about it. If you're conceited and attached, you can be attached even to the jhanas. Any kind of spiritual attainments. I've met people who claim to have very strange magical powers or odd experiences, and it doesn't seem to inherently have changed them much. Usually they're already pretty spiritual people, but I don't see it as having in and of itself been that impactful.
Yeah.
I mean, impactful, but not greatly so. Like, another thing I was thinking of is drugs. People who take psychedelics will say the same sorts of things, that it broadened their perspective. And I can agree with that, sure, but it's not really meaningful. Not really that. It's kind of like barking up the wrong tree. And if you see it as meaningful, you're missing the true meaning. What is truly meaningful?
I understand, Bante. Thank you.
I mean, one thing that does happen with all these things, even the jhanas, even near-death experiences, past life memories, magical, is people take what is not the path to be the path. That happens. So someone who has past life experiences will incorporate it into their idea of their wisdom, saying this is wisdom that I've gained, or maybe not saying it, but feeling it. This makes them somehow spiritually evolved. A lot of non-Buddhist spiritual people will talk like this, and will talk about their enlightenment and how they became enlightened, and their enlightenment experiences or their profound experiences, and there's a sort of conceit about it.
Yeah.
Of course, because it's not capable of destroying conceit. It's not capable of destroying ignorance.
Yeah, I think conceit and being unable to be humble is a very good indicator that somebody is in fact not enlightened, probably.
Well, even a Sotapanna can still have conceit. Probably
Yes,
less, but
yeah,
Mhm.
it's a lot less. It's a lot less.
I mean, the biggest one is wrong view, I think, right? That's what a Sotapanna is. So the most glaring one And I mean, if you don't hang out, I mean, you must. As a monk, I'm surrounded by people who have right view. Even people who aren't meditators, they all have mundane right view. So many people. But you must encounter people who have this wrong view. Even spiritual people, of course. Think of people from other religions. Sometimes have very profound experiences and have completely wrong view about them. Oh, it was God, or no.
Yeah, people have, I mean, think about themselves as being very spiritually advanced or even enlightened. And I don't know, you can't say anything. No.
How the young soul met her death was not mentioned in the texts, but it may be presumed that she was slaughtered by her have had a family and friends which she left behind, causing grief to them. It was comforting that she was reborn afterwards as a human being in 6 places from Suvarna Bhumi to Arunadapura. However, in each of these existences, each time she departed from one life, there must have been considerable suffering from sorrow, lamentation, and grief for her and for her dear ones. Then she finally became an arahant. Bhikkhuni Sumana Terai is the most heartening part of the story.
There's a story, a Thai story that I guess is probably not in English, but it's not really worth reading anyway. It's a long, long story about 2 people who almost become romantically engaged. And so it's kind of a romance, except they never actually meet. Or they meet, but then they're separated, and they spend the rest of samsara trying to get, or almost meeting again, and eventually becoming arahants. It's a sort of a quasi-Buddhist story, but it is gratifying to hear stories of people, their travels through samsara, and how they can eventually find their way to the graduation. I mean, it's not ordinary, to say the least. I mean, it goes without saying, it's not ordinary to become an arahant. Most Buddhists don't want to become an arahant. Most Buddhists are not deeply committed to freeing themselves from samsara. It doesn't even seem appealing to many people to leave. No matter how much stress or suffering they have, they're still very much attached to samsara, attached to people, attached to sensual pleasures. Even Buddhists have a long and winding path to get to become an arahant. It's quite a remarkable thing to hear of someone who actually came to this heightened understanding of samsara, to actually be able to say that they don't want to be born again, to actually be able to not have any inclination for more becoming. I mean, people can say it. Sometimes people are very much fed up with life and just wish they would die. But that's still attachment. It's still attachment to the pain and attachment to the suffering and attachment to freedom from suffering, to the pleasure doesn't prevent you from enjoying happy state. To actually have had enough and to not be triggered by happy or unhappy experiences. Buddhism is not just about becoming ordinary. It's not something that is common sense or ordinary people can look at and say, oh yeah, why didn't I think of that? It's something that you look at and you hear about and you think, that sounds kind of disturbing. To leave, to quit, to have enough, to not get any more. I've mentioned before this friend of mine when I was a teenager who was excited about Buddhism because it meant you had more chances. You could be born again and again, and it wasn't just one chance and then you go to heaven forever or hell forever. That's how many people would that's how Hindus look at rebirth. No, it's a game. And you find a way to play it better and good things happen to you. But it's forever. That's not fair to say, but that's a part of how Hinduism looks at it. They do have ideas of moksha, but kind of mixed up.
But Bhante, to be fair, Nibbana is actually the most disturbing thing, I would say, because it's so much the opposite of what we know or what experience is, because it's not any more experience. I mean, I'm putting it very negatively, maybe very controversial, but when I try to think of Nibbana in terms of thoughts, there's no way to, I don't know, make it sound like something that people would accept, because it is so different, because it is so unfamiliar.
Yeah. And because we seek out what we want, we seek out things that are wanted, that are desired. And you can't desire Nibbana, or you can desire the concept of it, but it's not something that you can cling to. It comes when there is no more craving, no more clinging.
And Pandey, may I clarify one thing, please? My understanding. So, for me, personally, I would like to become an arahant, because being in a mother's womb in any realms would be very horrible. So that's my main driving force. So as becoming an arahant, is it also reaching the nibbana? How? I'm a little bit confused there. Thank you, Bunny.
Yes. I mean, it is a subtle distinction that an arahant isn't horrified by being reborn. They don't have aversion to pain or suffering. You making that statement is great. I mean, and it's quite special, quite exceptional. It's hard to find people who think that way, but it's not sufficient, right? Because it's not on the level. If you really felt that way, you would be an arahant. Or if you really were at the point where you had no inclination for anything more, let's put it that way, then you would be an arahant. So not wanting to be reborn is generally on the right path, but it can also be vibhavatanha. This is a classic vibhavatanha, when you don't want to be reborn. You have aversion or fear towards it, or that sort of thing. But sorry, to answer your question, an arahant has their last life. So when an arahant passes away, there's no more re-arising. Which in and of itself is disturbing for people who are not interested, not deeply into Buddhism. It's disturbing that there should be nothing else. Doesn't sound very desirable. It's
Thank you,
not.
Bhante.
You can't desire something like that. And that's kind of the whole point. It's what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say from the beginning is that it's deep. It's hard to understand. It's hard even to be interested in. But the saving grace is that it's true. It's the truth. It's the truth that nothing is worth clinging to, that our clinging is actually causing us stress and suffering, and that's all it's doing. It's not actually bringing us satisfaction, not bringing us happiness. And so we muddle through samsara, suffering and enjoying and tossing and turning and stressing and literally, generally kind of in a wretched state. But it's only wretched from the point of view of someone who is, you could say, exalted, like an arahant. From the point of view of an arahant, their life is so sublime, their mind is so much at peace that they deeply and viscerally feel the wretchedness. Well, not viscerally because they've given it up, but they see and clearly perceive the wretchedness of ordinary existence. It's just so much stress that we don't even generally realize or take note of before practicing mindfulness.
Thank you very much, Bhante.
Okay, continuing with the next paragraph. The cause of the succession of her existences, departing from one life to be reborn in another, is craving or the truth of the origin of suffering. Other people who are not yet rid of craving will likewise go through the cycle of rebirth, dying from one life to be reborn in another. It is extremely important, therefore, to get established in the practice of the noble path in order to eradicate craving, otherwise called the truth of the origin of suffering. Sumana Theri first heard the discourse on the Satipatthana Sutta. Then she practiced mindfulness in accordance with the Satipatthana method, which enabled her to attain the status of a stream winner. Then, on hearing the Asi Visopama Sutta, she devoted herself more ardently to the practice and attained arahantship. Craving was then completely eradicated. Therefore, there would be no more rebirth for her, and she would be enjoying peace after her parinibbana. Sumanatheri, therefore, declared to her colleagues that she would finally pass away, parinibbutto, after the vital principle, ayu sankhara, for her present existence was exhausted. Thereupon her colleagues, the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, asked her to relate the story of her existences. I was a woman at the time of the Kakusantha Buddha. When I died from there, I became a hen. I was killed by an eagle which broke off my head and devoured me. Then I became a princess in the human world. She continued to recount her past existences until the time of her final existence at Bhokanta village. She concluded, Thus have I passed through 13 existences, encountering the vicissitudes of life and each existence. In this last existence, being weary of the cycle of rebirth, I have become an ordained bhikkhuni and finally attained arahantship. I urge all of you, dear virtuous bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, to put forth effort to mindfully become fully accomplished in morality, concentration, and wisdom. Then she passed away, causing religious agitation in the minds of her audience, consisting of men, women, bhikkhus, and bhikkhunis. This story of the young soul is fully described in the commentary of the Dhammapada.
So to be clear, she had many more than 13 existences. This is just her last 13 existences. Of course, the existences in samsara for all beings is countless. But she actually put an end to that cycle.
I'm sorry, I have one more question. I don't mean to drag a lot of time.
Don't be sorry.
So
questions are a big part of this.
Thank you, Bande. So I was listening to the Satipatthana talk by Sayadaw Usilananda, and in that he referred to Mahasi Sayadaw's, work, and he mentioned that when eradicating these mental defilements, there are three stages. One is momentary removal, the second one is temporary removal, and the third one is total removal. So for the temporary removal, it mentioned that when the yogi, the bhikkhu, reaches the jhana stage. So then I was thinking, this is vipassana meditation, and is he referring to concentration, or is a jhana that is something that we talked about in previous talks? So I thought I would like to ask your advice on that, please, Bande. Thank you.
I think that one is referring to samatha meditation. I'm not entirely clear. But momentary, I think what he's saying is that as opposed to that type of temporary removal, because it's temporary, but it's not momentary. It's temporary, and I don't think temporary is probably the literal word for it. I can't think of the word at the moment. But it's like through exertion or through suppression, you could say. It's suppressed by the jhanas, meaning the jhanas prevent the arising of craving because the mind is in a trance state. But momentary is different because momentary is not focused on a concept. So that kind of jhana concentration is focused on an idea or an object that you fixate on and create a trance out of. But momentary eradication is every moment of mindfulness focused with ultimate reality as an object. So seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking, that sort of thing. And you focus on that because of the clarity of mind, because of seeing an object just as it is, it also suppresses the hindrances or blocks them. But it's just every moment blocking them. The real difference is the focus on ultimate reality. And because you're focused on ultimate reality, you can see the three characteristics because of the clarity, because of the absence of the hindrances.
Thank you.
The story of Samanadeva. Even if one were engaged in meditation practice to dispel craving until one became fully developed in the knowledge of the path, craving could still give rise to rebirth. This fact is borne out by the story of a deva named Samana. During the lifetime of
Samana means
yes,
like recluse. It's a word we use for Buddhist monks, but also anybody who leaves the home life, the Buddha called a samana. So he also differentiated between conventional samana and an actual samana. But the word is used because this deva meaning angel, was a Buddhist monk before and died as a Buddhist monk and became a deva as a Buddhist monk.
during the lifetime of the Buddha, certain young men, having established faith in the dispensation of the Buddha, got himself ordained and stayed with his preceptor for 5 reigns, Vasa. He performed all the major and minor incumbent duties for his preceptor Upadhyaya and learned thoroughly the 2 codes of the Patimokkha discipline. He also mastered the procedure for purifying himself from serious as well as trifling offenses. Then, taking a meditation object of his choice, he repaired to a solitary abode in the forest and devoted himself incessantly to the practice of meditation.
His efforts at meditation were very strenuous, even at midnight, which the Blessed One had allowed as the time for rest and sleep. He continued with the practice, thus striving day and night and getting weak due to lack of sufficient nourishing food. He was suddenly seized with a cutting pain, a paralytic stroke which ruptured the spinal nerve, causing instant death. He was meditating while walking and thus said to have passed away in the course of performing the duties of a bhikkhu.
Yes, one thing you should never do is stop eating, especially during a meditation course. It's common, it's a part of our tradition to challenge advanced meditators to cut down on sleeping. So the Buddha allowed for something like 3 or 4 hours of sleep for dedicated meditators. For most people, that's not even thinkable. 4 hours is crazy. But we eventually challenge meditators and instruct them to strive for that. And they will get to the point where 4 hours is actually remarkably comfortable because of the absence of the hindrances. Now, it kind of goes against modern science because modern science uses ordinary people as test subjects, right? So if you test ordinary people, you see, yep, people need so many hours of sleep. Now, they don't test meditators, people who have cleansed their mind of stress and worry and fear and craving and greed and anger and frustration and boredom, even worry and doubt and all these things that stress the mind and tax the body as well. And so the mind is able to recover, the body is able to recover and stay healthy, even with limited sleep. We also have meditators who don't sleep, who practice day and night. They will, for short periods anyway, practice walking and sitting all day and all night. And they're able to do that comfortably or relatively comfortably because of the strength of their practice and the development of their practice. But none of that is really possible if you stop eating. The body needs nourishment, especially if you're doing a lot of intensive meditation practice and you've given up the sleeping, And so this is something you should never do. We had one meditator once. In all my time, I've had one meditator. I probably had more, but one who admitted to fasting. And I encouraged him not to. This was a long time ago. I was actually just a young monk at the time. But I was teaching. It was early, one of the first periods I was actually teaching. I encouraged him not to. And he persisted, he insisted. And then he came back to me and said he had it pulled something in his leg just by walking. He had suddenly had this what do you call this, a pulled nerve or something, where he couldn't walk anymore. His leg just froze up and it was an intense pain. So this resonates with me. I've heard this before, where someone stopped eating and bad things happened. Or you can do it if you're not dedicating yourself strenuously to the path to enlightenment, but don't do it if you are. And the Buddha was against fasting in general. It doesn't do what people think it does. It just weakens the body and prevents intense defilements from arising, but doesn't give you a chance to learn and to actually cleanse your mind of the tendency to get angry or greedy or deluded. Doesn't mean you should eat a lot, but you should eat every day for sure.
According to the commentary, if any bhikkhu, while engaged in walking up and down the cloister walk or standing leaning against the leaning post, or sitting or lying down at the head of the cloister walk with the double robe on his head, passes away, he is said to die in harness. So too a bhikkhu dies in harness if he passes away in the course of teaching a discourse, particularly on liberation from the cycle of existences.
As the bhikkhu of our story was engaged in meditating while walking up and down the cloister walk, we could take it that he passed away while he was contemplating the mental and physical phenomena of the body postures in accordance with the teaching in the Satipatthana Sutta. Although he had put in a great deal of effort in the practice of meditation, he passed away without attaining the arahantship because he was not fully endowed with the supporting perfections, parami, necessary for such attainments. Complete eradication of craving is not possible unless arahantship has been attained. That this bhikkhu had not yet developed even the stage of a stream winner will become clear later. Therefore, because of craving which can cause rebirth, he was reborn in the celestial abode of Thavatimsa, a magnificent celestial palace awaited him in consequence of the merit he had acquired in the practice of meditation. By spontaneous rebirth, he appeared as if just awakened from sleep at the entrance of the palace, a celestial being resplendent in full celestial attire.
Yeah, so one example, it's not exactly pertinent to what we were talking about before, but it's related, is that Devas always remember their previous life, the life before they became a Deva, because they're born Upapadika. It doesn't really hit them in such a way as to make them want to strive. Mostly doesn't hit them in a way that makes them want to strive for enlightenment. For most people, well, the celestial palace is a bit distracting. And if anything, they feel liberated. Right? Without depth of wisdom to appreciate that this is problematic. I could just as easily, I could have to do all that over again. They become distracted, as most beings do. Tatra tatra abhinandini, wherever we are born, we delight therein. So we forget about small babies forget about their past lives, for the most part. Devas eventually do as well. They stop thinking about the human world. You have to have the depth of wisdom in order to appreciate the problem with rebirth.
At that moment, about 1,000 celestial princesses who had been awaiting the arrival of the master of the palace, saying, "Our Lord has arrived, let us entertain him," gathered round him, holding musical instruments in their hands to welcome him joyously. The Deva Lord of the palace, however, did not even realize that he had taken a new existence in another realm. He was under the impression that he was still a bhikkhu in the human realm. On the side of the celestial maidens, he took them to be female visitors to his monastery. He covered up his bare left shoulder with the upper garment and remained seated, his eyes lowered and assuming a dignified and reserved pose. Realizing at once that the new being must have been a bhikkhu in his previous existence, the celestial ladies addressed him. "My lord, this is the abode of celestial beings. It is not the time to be observing the code of monastic discipline. It is the occasion for enjoyment of celestial pleasures." However, he continued on maintaining solemn reserve and dignity. This Deva has not realized that he has become a celestial being in the realm of deities. Let us drive home this fact to him by our welcoming revelries. So saying, the celestial damsels started playing the musical instruments accompanied by songs. The Deva all the more tightened his retiring disposition, maintaining his dignified solemnity, thinking that the female visitors had come to his forest abode to abandon themselves to frivolous merriment.
Whereupon the celestial ladies brought out a body-length mirror and placed it in front of the Deva. On seeing his reflection in the mirror, he finally realized that he had left the bhikkhu's existence and taken rebirth in the celestial realm. Samana Deva was greatly perturbed. He reflected, "I did not take up meditation to be reborn in this celestial realm. My objective was to attain the most profitable goal of arahantship. However, I am like a boxer who entered the boxing competition aiming at a championship gold medal, but was awarded only a bundle of turnips." Extremely agitated in mind, he thought, the celestial pleasures are easily attainable. The lifetime of an enlightened one is a rare occasion. To hear the teaching of the Buddha and to attain the Noble Path is of utmost importance. By wallowing in celestial pleasures, there is the danger of losing the opportunity of meeting the Buddha. So, without taking the trouble of entering the palatial building, he repaired hastily to the presence of the Buddha while the morality he had observed as a bhikkhu remained intact. His celestial damsels also accompanied him as if they were anxious not to lose sight of him. On reaching the presence of the Blessed One, he addressed him. Venerable Sir, I want. In what way will it be possible to avoid and proceed past the Navadhavana garden, otherwise known as the Mohana garden, the grove of stupidity, because it encourages foolish behavior in the celestial beings who visit it, where thousands of female celestial beings indulge in singing and yodeling, where numerous demons, goblins, and spirits haunt.
So Nandavana means literally forest of delight. And so he called it the Mohavana or something like that. Mohavana means the forest of ignorance or of delusion. But this is so he had a unique perspective on heaven, and this is remarkable about this story. This is something that is impressive and worth remembering, worth appreciating this perspective and how difficult it is, how rare it is for someone to look at a palace. It's as though he won the lottery. I mean, that even trivializes it. It's as though he won. I mean, you can't even compare. But the closest is king of the world. It's not even on the level of what he won. And to look at it and say this is a bunch of turnips. Ordinary people don't have that ability. Anyone who did good deeds and went to heaven would be completely corrupted by it, lost to it, completely intoxicated by the addiction to sensual pleasures. But he has two things going for him, at least. He has more as well. But the two main things he has is, one, he has his practice. He has done intensive practice. And by practicing mindfulness, he was surely seeing the three characteristics, noticing that it didn't matter what he experienced. It was all made up of moments of experience. So if he sees a beautiful palace or hears singing or dancing or these beautiful men and women and angels, he realized that it was just seeing. It was just moments of experience. And he was in that, as Mahasi Sayadaw points out, he was in he was still in a repulsive mood, a repulsed mood. So by saying that, he's pointing out that it's temporary. And this is, I was mentioning last week about this Brahma who became a human and was completely repulsed by sensual pleasures, but eventually became intoxicated by them again. So certainly without the proper support, it's entirely possible that he would fall into enjoying the craving, because his knowledge was just temporary. But the other thing he has going for him, it goes without saying really, is he had the support of the Buddha. And so just going back to what we were talking about earlier, is that most people don't have someone laying it out for them. I mean, we often take for granted our knowledge of Buddhism, and we think, well, of course, it's just obvious, but it's really not. There's so much that's not obvious if you don't have someone laying it out for you, giving you a map and giving you an outline to reality that actually is real and accords with experience and accords with observation, accords with actual observable reality. And in fact, mostly are presented with completely ridiculous and out of touch narratives and views and beliefs about the nature of reality that often encourage intoxication, encourage enjoyment. I remember I was at university, I was sitting on an interfaith or a multi-faith group. We're trying to get all religions sort of represented at the university I was at. So I was part of this working group to make that happen. And the Christians were very excited to have someone who they thought was very much on the wrong path, who they could bring to Christianity. And so they would often hit me up. And the Catholic priest one day, he gave me a ride, I think, to one of the meetings, and quite innocently, with his fake innocence about him, started asking about or talking about how he played the guitar, or they were listening to music or something, and started asking seemingly innocently about what I thought of such things. And I started trying to delicately lay out the fact that music is not considered to be worthwhile, and he couldn't. He pretended not to be able to understand, or well, I don't know. I mean, he pretended to be surprised that I would done music or enjoyment of sensuality and that sort of thing. I guess it wasn't entirely. It wasn't as though he didn't believe what he was saying, because they actually do believe that things like music and enjoyment of sensuality are. I mean, they're given by God. They are right. Even Buddhists have difficulty with this. Buddhists will be very much, reasonably so, caught up in things like wealth and entertainment, romance, having children, and so on and so on. We get caught up in so many narratives about the world. That we don't have this, people who are not us doing this sort of thing every week don't have the benefit of either the right information, right theory and doctrine and Dhamma that we've been given, and they also don't have the benefit of practicing. Do you think how different it is to see the world from the perspective of momentary experiences? It's like this hidden world that you can describe to people, and they'll say, yes, seeing is seeing, hearing is hearing, so big deal. Yes, that's true, I know it. But they don't. They've never actually observed it to any appreciable degree, for the most part. And until you do, it's like this curtain covering up reality, preventing you from seeing things as they actually are. As soon as you do it, it's like the clouds have parted and the sun comes up. Oh, there's this whole other world here. This whole other, well, not this whole other, it's like, oh, this is reality.
Ante, for me, it was very surprising or heartening to see that the power of the habit of mindfulness is so powerful that it continued in the next existence. Even though I think it was mentioned that he was not a Sotapanna, even so, like for him to have that right view, etc., just from the continuance of mindfulness, that habit and that power of that habit is very heartening to know.
A Deva, being born as a Deva, this is an example of that sort of refutes the idea that there is an intermediate period. It seems that there can be, that some beings kind of hang around for a while after they pass away, but for someone who's born as a Deva, it's actually instantaneous. As we see, he died and boom, instantly reborn, and it was probably not instantaneous. There has to be this sort of narrative of choosing what you're going to cling to, this sort of travel or process of dying, that you still have to cling to something, in this case clinging to something that leads him to heaven, but very quick. And so he's still basically the same person. I mean, much of him is still very much the same. It's like be like getting knocked out and waking up the next moment. You don't forget. I mean, unless you have amnesia, you get knocked out, you wake up, and you're like, "Oh, what happened?" It feels like you just fell asleep. I think he mentions here somewhere that it's just like falling asleep and waking up.
But on the other hand, this also seems quite scary, as you already touched upon, Bhante, that even though he was very much intent on seclusion and practicing, he immediately got challenged and pulled towards giving into sensuality. So I was thinking, well, if he has the Buddha to go back to, what would someone of us do if that would happen? If something like this would happen.
Good
I mean,
point.
It's great. The Deva realms for practicing. We also discussed this in the past, that it's really nice to. You don't have to worry about the body having to not becoming sick and things like that. But when hearing this story, it kind of undermines that for me.
Well, the theory is, and I'm not saying it's entirely sound, but the theory is that now we have the advantage of the Buddha's dispensation being propagated into heaven. Lots of people like this. Let's see, what is his outcome? He might still be up there, right? He might very well still be up there, so you could go meet him if you ended up in Dawadingsa. But the point is that there are so many Buddhists up in heaven that it seems like a reasonable thing to be able to find support there in the various heavens. There's not just one heaven, of course. There's many different realms and realities. I don't know. It's a very sound bet. I wouldn't rely on that idea. But the other evidence that we have is that when the Buddha did teach, it seems like Devas were very quickly able to appreciate his teaching, much more quickly than most humans. So there does seem to be the potential for Devas to appreciate the Buddha's teaching quicker. It's obviously not homogeneous, and I think that's important. You can't take this one story and say, oh, that's what it's like to be in heaven. That's what it was like for him. I mean, obviously, not everyone who goes to heaven is going to have 1,000 princesses hanging off of them. I don't even know what that is. It doesn't sound, it sounds exaggerated. I doubt that's exactly what happened. But something happened, if this happened at all, something like this happened. Probably not 1,000 princesses. Just doesn't quite add up, and certainly not everyone is going to get it. I mean, women obviously are not going to, heterosexual women are not going to be enticed by 1,000 princesses. But there's some idea that with great merit, you can be put in positions like being a king of, or a lord over a mansion in heaven or something like that. I mean, something like this. But it's going to vary very much. Like, there's stories like King Bimbisara actually became a lower level deva for some reason, and so on. There's another king who became a lower realm deva because there was a story of this king who, can't remember which king it was now, who became Buddhist and was very much dedicated to Buddhist teaching, but he gave alms. He decided he wanted to have a standing almsgiving to monks. Anytime Buddhist monks were around, he wanted to be able to give them food, but he didn't do it himself. He had one of his ministers give food to the monks. So he set this up, he paid for it, he had it all lined up, and he had someone else do it. So he wasn't the one who was giving the food to the monks. And as a result of his good deeds and his general goodness and Buddhist dedication to the Buddhist teaching, he was born in heaven. But this guy, this minister of his, or this agent of his who was giving the food to the monks, also went to heaven and became a higher level deva, like a lord deva over him, because he did better deeds by actually giving alms to Buddhist monks. So it's not all the same up in heaven. It seems complicated, but it does seem that many devas are able to appreciate the Buddha's teaching, even if you put aside the commentarial claims that thousands and thousands of devas became enlightened just listening to the Buddha's words again and again and again. You have this verse, the verse that's coming up, or we're not going to get to it this week, but the verse of this story. And you have a whole list of verses, a whole 2 or 3 chapters of verses that were all spoken by devas. And if you read those verses, I've talked about this before, but if you read those verses, it's hard not to believe that there's something special about them. They aren't the kind of things that humans would say. Humans don't say those sorts of things. They don't talk like that. There's something strange or special about those verses. It's very much what it gives you a sense of how angels think and how they talk and how they look at reality. It's quite impressive to read those chapters, and then you can read the backstory behind each verse. Like this story is a backstory behind this verse that's coming up. Mostly you have to read it in Pali. I'm not sure there's much English. But there's the Dictionary of Pali Proper Names that has some of the summaries of the stories, that sort of thing.
Thank you for that elaboration, Bhante. I will take back most of my skepticism. Not that I would have much control over what will happen in the next life.
Yeah, we have one of Ajahn Tong's teachers, Lumpur Chodok, I've mentioned this before. He said, don't be born a human. You're going to be born and be born again as a deva, because that's where all the Buddhists are. So we have him, and he was a scholar and a practitioner, quite special. So, for what it's worth, he said that, and shouldn't just dismiss it.
And I'm thinking like you'll have to have some level of defilements cut off to be in the Deva realms, or at least at the time of death, you might have to be pure, right? To be in the Deva realms.
The Deva realms require Mahakusala. Maha means great, Kusala means wholesomeness. Kusala is the good things that we do. If you are have a profound depth of goodness. It means you do good things. Generally, if you do good things beyond the ordinary. So it doesn't mean you see a beggar on the street and you give him a quarter. It means you do something meaningful. Something that is, and the point is something that's not really human. It's not what human, it's not related to human life. It's like above and beyond what is reasonable for a human. So it's reasonable to share what you have. You know, this people say, do unto others as they would do unto you, as you would have them do unto you, right? This golden rule. That's not Buddhism. That's humanism. And they'll say that. Humanists, they say this is humanism. Humanism is the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. My mother's a humanist, and this is the sort of thing she subscribes to. There's nothing wrong with it, per se. I mean, it's actually good. But it's not Buddhism. Buddhism is, even if they do bad things to you, do unto others. I mean, it's like, even Christ said this, right? It's one of the best things about Christianity. Turn the other cheek. If someone asks you for your, I mean, I don't know, it's a little weird actually, but the same ideas. You go above and beyond. There's a story in the Jatakas of two kings that meet on the road, and they're in their chariots, right? And they're on this road, and there's only enough room for one chariot. So they come and they meet head on, and the drivers of the two chariots start fighting, start arguing. My Lord is king. You can't block the road. Get off the road. And I would say, well, my Lord is king. You must get off the road. And they started saying, well, which one of, you know, what's so great about your king? My king is great. My king, if someone is good, he responds with goodness. And if someone is evil, he responds with evil. He is the most just king there ever is. And the driver of the Bodhisattva, who's to become the Buddha, said, that may be so with your king, but that's not the best. My king, righteous with righteousness he meets, but unrighteousness he also meets with righteousness. And they thought about it together, and this other driver thought about it, and the king in the other chariot thought about it as well, and he heard this, and he said, oh, this is true, this is actually better. And so they both got down and moved the king got out of his chariot and got out and helped push the chariot off the road to give way to the Bodhisattva and his driver. This is Buddhism, is above and beyond. I mean, it's also how to get into heaven, so it's not actually deep Buddhism, but it's that idea that Buddhism is above and beyond, which makes it hard for people, as I was alluding to, it makes it hard for people to be interested in practicing Buddhism, dedicate themselves to it. It makes it hard to continue in the practice when things are comfortable, when things are good. Because Buddhism is not the path to be an ordinary human being. It's not even the path to go to heaven. Even going to heaven is not considered enough, right? It's not the path to heaven is, those practices are still not sufficient. They're not actually Buddhism yet. Buddhism is like perfection. You can think of Buddhism as perfection. And so if you don't want to be perfect, if you're not keen or ready, feel confident in yourself and your ability to become perfect, just know that it is perfection. And to the extent that you practice Buddhism, to that extent you'll become perfect. So if you practice a little bit, you become a little more perfect. Practice a lot, you'll become much, much more perfect. Meaning it's the ultimate, it's the highest, it's the pinnacle. Most religious and spiritual traditions don't claim this. Whatever they claim and say, oh, well, all religions claim such high, lofty things, most don't claim the practice leading to perfection. Buddhism does. For all Buddhists. It doesn't say you must in order to be a Buddhist. It says this is what we teach. And so You can call yourself Buddhist, but you're only really a Buddhist to the extent that you become perfect. It's one way of looking at it is all Buddhists are different levels of Buddhists, different degrees of Buddhists. An Arahant is a real Buddhist because they've become perfect. Perfect in the sense, in the specific sense, a very real sense, an important sense, that they have no greed, they have no anger, they have no delusion. And there's no potential for those to ever arise again. That's perfect. Most Buddhists will never get there in this lifetime, or many of them not in any lifetime. But, well, not in any soon lifetime, but to the extent that they practice Buddhism, they will find greater perfection. And that's what Buddhism offers. So it's the point is, don't trivialize Buddhism and say it's just about being a good person or that sort of thing. Buddhism is a real deep and profound and challenging thing. But that shouldn't be discouraging. This means you might not go all the way, not right away. You might not be able to, you shouldn't be able to quickly perfect Buddhism, become a real, true Buddhist. Much harder than people often think. Buddhism is much more of a challenge than you realize, even when doing basic meditation practice. Talked a lot. We must have questions.
Yes, there are many questions waiting. But thank you so much, Bhante, for your explanation.
Sadhu.
Sadhu. Bhante, here's the first question that we have. I suffer from very low energy level because I am on compulsory treatment with antipsychotic medication. This means I am unable to get work, and this makes me miserable. Do you have any advice?
Can you tell the difference between a cup of rice and a cup of water? That's what my teacher asked. You can tell the difference. I assume you can. If you couldn't, it would be not really feasible for you to actually type out that question. That's all it takes. If you can do that much, tell the difference between a cup of water and a cup of rice, you can be mindful. So the advice is to take up the practice of mindfulness. Yeah, we have a booklet, we have an at-home course, you could start there. You might find that very helpful. But what I would say specifically for your situation, for what you're telling us, is that none of that is actually making you miserable. And it may seem like splitting hairs or something, but it's an important distinction, because that's essential in terms of how you look at the experience in order to be able to actually tackle it. When you say X is making me miserable, the only answer is to change X. So, with things being like this, misery is inevitable. That's what you're saying, basically. I mean, words are words, and I don't want to overanalyze what you're saying, but most likely, based on your words, this is the narrative in your mind. This is the perspective, the way you look at it, because it's such a common way of looking at things. You make me so mad. This makes me so miserable. This, I am afraid of this, this sort of thing. The way we say it is based on the way we look at it. You look at this experience as miserable. Like people say, oh, the weather is miserable out. The weather can't be miserable. And likewise, you not being able to get work is not miserable. It's not even real. It's just words that are based on concepts, and there's layers and layers of concepts that we build up. And we say, this is the way things are, and this is what it's doing to me. We blame things for our problems. And the point is that it's not quite accurate. I mean, all the pieces are real. Yes, I believe you. You're not able to get work. Yeah, I'm not going to say you're wrong. Surely I will agree. I will accept that there's no reason to doubt the fact that you have very low energy level, and that is making it so that you're unable, or at least very difficult to get work, that for all intents and purposes, unable to get work. And that you find yourself miserable. And if this weren't like this, you wouldn't be miserable. So it's reasonable to assume that this is making you miserable. But it's not quite true. There's a missing element, and this is what the Buddha called dependent origination. Buddha's teaching on dependent origination that's so famous in Buddhist circles. And it's not, dependent origination is a core Buddhist theory, but the point of it, and the most important point of it, is that in the process of causality, there comes a moment where if the mind sees clearly, it escapes unscathed, it continues on peacefully. But if the mind has ignorance and delusion, and it sees the experience wrongly, it will be triggered by the experience, by an innocuous experience, an ordinary experience, a completely harmless experience, something that is completely unable to cause stress or suffering, suddenly becomes a cause for stress and suffering, not because of the experience, but because of how we react to it, how we see it, not how we react. We react based on how we see it. So when you see something with all this extra baggage surrounding it, that baggage leads you to react in a certain way, usually the way you're habitually inclined to react to it. And so that's what's happening here. This experience of not being able to find work isn't making you miserable. Your perspective on it and your interpretation of it and all the baggage you put on that experience is what's leading you to be miserable. And so at the core of that experience is going to be moments of seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting and feeling and thinking. What we do is teach you to observe those moments and to, so to speak, purify those moments. And that's just a lofty way of saying, see those experiences as they truly are. Purification is not some deeper mystical thing. It's let seeing just be seeing, hearing just be hearing. Let it be nothing more, no less. No more means don't add something, no less means don't ignore it. Don't just brush it off as meaningless. Because this is where the problems are occurring. They're happening at the moment of seeing, at the moment of hearing. Every moment when you, and thinking, right? In this case, it's most likely every moment of thinking. You think about the fact, I have no job, I can't get a job, I'm on these medications. All of these thoughts are actually innocent. The thoughts are not the problem. The fact is, when you have those thoughts, you say yes, and you're triggered by that thought. Miserable. Again and again and again. But it's happening in those moments. And this is what mindfulness teaches. So the idea, and you'll read this in the booklet, and you'll learn this in the at-home course, the idea is to cleanse those moments. Let seeing just be seeing. You say to yourself, when you see something, seeing, hearing. And when you think something, you just say thinking. It doesn't get rid of the thought. Thought's not the problem. It helps you, it frees you. It's like a roadblock. Stops there. It's just seeing, just hearing, just thinking. And you don't have to be miserable.
Bhante. I just have one follow-up on this. Is where do the Dhammas get covered in this, apart from the thinking?
Dhammas?
I'm sorry, I meant to say the hindrances.
Oh, well, the idea there is that the hindrances don't arise. When you're thinking, a thought that normally makes you miserable, and you say thinking, then the hindrances, it's a roadblock. There's no chance. I mean, it takes work, and obviously it doesn't happen in the beginning. But that's why we also have you note the hindrances, because it's another roadblock. The hindrances don't lead to more hindrances, don't lead to more stress and more reaction. Roadblock, you can put it up even at the hindrances. When you like something or dislike something, you can also say liking. Let liking just be liking. Disliking just be like. Let being miserable just be. So you raise a good point, because it's important to also mention that when you're feeling miserable, you should also note miserable, or disliking or upset. I was just giving more theory about the process, but it also works with miserable, because being miserable doesn't stop there. When you're miserable, you react to the misery. You say, oh, I'm so miserable. And then you do something like maybe kill yourself. People will commit suicide because they're miserable. But it doesn't mean, misery doesn't mean I must kill myself. It doesn't mean things are anything. It just means there's misery. There's an experience of misery, and there's moments of experience of misery. And they also arise and cease. I mean, ultimately, a person without a job, this is theoretical, right? Practically, this is not reasonable. But the theory is important because it helps us to get closer to that. You can be without a job, without money, without food. You can even be without air or water. You can be dying, drowning. You can be homeless on the street. You can be in jail. You can be in the jaws of a tiger. There's a story about this monk who was a long story about monks who were being eaten one by one by this tiger, until they finally realized that some of their friends were missing because of this tiger. They were just meditating, right? Nobody was talking to each other, and they all just got eaten one by one. And then this one monk got eaten by a tiger, and they just said, remember, don't forget your practice. And so even while he was being eaten by the tiger, he practiced mindfulness and became an arahant. No matter what your experience is, it's still just seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking. Even the pain, even the death, dismemberment, is still just moments of experience. And so an arahant doesn't suffer from them. Now again, this is theoretical. Practically, without the training of an arahant, not reasonable to think that you could ever accomplish that. But understanding that is a huge a huge weight off your shoulders. You don't have to be anything. You don't need anything. And it's a big part of progress, because as you start to see that more and more, you suffer less and less, and you're less pulled around by the vicissitudes of life.
Bhante, here is the next question. I have telebroadcasting, thinking others can hear my thoughts. I note it as thinking or telepathy. How else can I deal with it? It is bad in crowds and also when talking one-on-one. My concentration also drops. It is also hard to realize that it is not real because it feels so real.
Well, it can be real. Some people can actually read other people's minds. It's a scary, scary thing, but it does exist. I experienced it once. It was scary. But it's not scary. And what you're leaving out here is how you react to this. So this is the same as the last question. I won't go into much detail because much of the same advice applies. Thinking other people can hear your thoughts, you're missing the point. You're barking up the wrong tree. When you focus on that, which is reasonable, and this is the mistake we make, you focus on that and you say, thinking this is a problem. How do I deal with it? You don't deal with it. You don't have to deal with it. Those thoughts are just thoughts. And this is difficult. We had a monk once who was, I guess, paranoid schizophrenic. He ended up trying to kill himself several times and disrobing eventually. He believed so many things. Like he had all these crazy ideas about what was going on around him. And he said, you don't understand. I have these thoughts that are just repulsive and horrible. They make me a bad person, was the idea. And I tried to tell him I was actually junior to him, I think. Yeah, I was junior to him. But I said, they're just thoughts. The thoughts are not the problem. But he couldn't get it. And so I don't know how effective me saying this to you is going to be. Obviously, the only answer is to actually practice to see these things for yourself. But if you're interested in practice, do pick up the practice. If you are practicing, I can only point out to you that the thoughts are not the problem. And if you say thinking, they don't necessarily go away. But the problem isn't the thoughts. The problem is how you react to them, how you don't see them just as thinking, how you get afraid of them. It is not bad in crowds. It just happens in crowds. What's bad and what you're not saying is something else that you should be telling me. You should tell me how it makes you afraid, or how it makes you upset, or how it makes you angry or worried, or any number of other emotions. And that's what's really the problem. And this is what we miss. We miss the fact that there's nothing wrong with people hearing your thoughts. There's nothing wrong with people hating you for hearing your thoughts. Nothing wrong to you anyway. There's nothing wrong with people killing you for your thoughts. I mean, that's, again, theoretical, tough. You can't really appreciate that unless you're an arahant. But it's true. What's wrong is how you get upset about all these things. And when you see that, you put yourself in, this is an example of how we put ourselves in an impossible situation. The only answer is to get rid of these thoughts. You can't get rid of these thoughts, therefore you don't have an answer, right? You're in a position that's impossible. It's so common. I hear this again and again and again. What do I do? You're missing something. You're not even telling me about the important part. The part where it says that you react to this experience. Really try to get it through. It's very hard to appreciate this. It's very hard to understand this. This is not the problem. The thoughts are not the problem. Learn to see them as they are and face them. And learn to face the fear or the disliking or whatever it is that it triggers. And stop letting it snowball, because it becomes a cycle and it builds and builds and builds until it becomes a real monster, a real danger.
The next question, Bante. How do you tell when meditation is genuinely uprooting suffering, rather than simply teaching the mind to avoid certain kinds of pain?
So meditation doesn't really uproot suffering in and of itself. Meditation results in the experience of nibbana, which uproots suffering. That's probably a better way of saying it. So this kind of question is, I mean, it's common, but it belies the misunderstanding of, or the again, barking up the wrong tree, focusing on the wrong things. So it's not about uprooting suffering. It's actually about, practically speaking, it's about seeing suffering clearly. The Buddha said about the First Noble Truth, parinyaya. It is to be pari. Pari means like perimeter. It's like the Latin peri, or wherever, or Greek, or wherever that comes from. Pari means all around, all encompassing. Nyaya is nya, to know. Parinyaya means it's to be known completely. This is how you should think of suffering. Don't uproot it. See it clearly. See it fully. Understand it fully. But we certainly don't teach to avoid. If you're understanding avoidance as the goal of meditation, then perhaps you're not practicing mindfulness. But mindfulness is very much not about avoiding, about facing. This is when we say to ourselves, seeing, we're facing, seeing. When you feel pain, for example, a good example, you say to yourself, pain, and that is the most direct way you can possibly face the experience. You're not reacting to it. You're not avoiding it. You're just there. You're in your strongest, most direct, most oppositional state, where you literally, this is the experience. I'm right here. I'm not going to budge. It also means you're not going to fight. You're not going to create conflict with it. You're there, and you're there to stay. That's mindfulness.
Here's the next question, Bante. I live in a rural area where there is a Mahayana monastery nearby. Although I don't believe everything they teach, should I go there in absence of a Theravada monastery and learn without issues?
I can't recommend to go and learn from the Mahayana Buddhists, but don't take that the wrong way. Many of the things that they teach are beneficial. It could be, depending on the place, it could be an entirely beneficial experience for you. I mean, certainly there's going to be generosity. They will be giving things, teachings, and even sometimes food or that sort of thing. Remember when I first learned about Buddhism, far before I was a Buddhist, we went to this, I was with a friend in Toronto, and there was this Korean Buddhist church. Korean? No, Japanese, not Korean. No. I think, actually, I'm not sure now but I think it was a Japanese church, just this little Japanese church, and I passed it every day on my way to the subway. So finally, with this friend, I decided to go in. And they gave us this wonderful vegetarian lunch. Well, first there was a sermon about something about, it was so long ago, but it must have been about 17. But there was a sermon about fire. There was something about fire, I can't remember, or, staying out of the fire or something like that, the fire of hell, I think. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but there was a sermon about some Buddhist ideas. And then there was a lunch, and everyone was so kind and nice. It was just a holy, wholesome experience. So you may have that sort of experience, but I'm not one of those people who say that their doctrine is compatible with our doctrine. I think fundamentally, most of Mahayana groups, the doctrine is at its core incompatible with what we teach. And it's not about, I mean, you can gloss over it and you can say the Mahayana is not, because I don't believe the Mahayana is incompatible. It's just that the texts that have been written about the Mahayana say things that are from the point of view of people who are not enlightened. They say things like the Buddha lied, and then they say it's not a lie. And it's not a lie not because it's true, but it's not a lie because he had the best of intentions. He was acting like a father when their child is in a burning building. They lie to them about there being something outside. They say, hey, there's these toys outside. And there are no toys outside. But it gets the child out of the burning building, so it's not a lie. This is what they say. This is not compatible with Theravada Buddhism. We don't believe that the Buddha lied. We emphatically deny the idea that the Buddha would ever do such a thing. And that's a very core teaching in most Mahayana circles. There are other texts, most of the Mahayana texts, but this is sort of a deep doctrinal issue. If you don't delve deeply like that, probably much of their meditation is very strong. I know most Mahayana places that I've been to have some form of meditation practice that can be very impressive. It's usually what we would call samatha meditation, so it's only tranquility, but can be quite powerful. Most of their teachings are about good things like compassion and kindness and helping others and so on. So it's just the nitty-gritty, the deep stuff that's really the problem. And most of that, you just go there as a casual participant. It's not really a problem. That being said, you could always start a meditation group in your area. You could always have a meetup group, get together, advertise it, see if there's anyone else who's interested in just having a mindfulness meditation group. Don't have to be Buddhist, doesn't have to be Buddhist. Be the leader that you're seeking. Be the instigator. We can even send you booklets. We could We can even support. We tried to set up this system, where we would support such groups. If someone started a group, we would do what we could to support them. We'll send you booklets, be that kind of umbrella organization, and be somewhere you can send people. So if people say, hey, this is interesting, how can I learn more? You can send them along. We have teachers teaching at-home meditation courses. And we have a center here in Sri Lanka if someone's really dedicated. Yes, I wouldn't be too concerned about going there. Just be aware that if you follow us, I don't believe you can completely follow them as well. Again, it depends. I mean, Mahayana is such a huge thing and there's so many different groups, but brushing with broad strokes, that's the gist of it. That's the crux of the issue. There are doctrinal differences. And what I mean by the Mahayana not being incompatible is that the Mahayana is my interpretation or our interpretation of the Mahayana, and it doesn't apply to all Mahayana groups. They don't believe the same thing. It's the path of the Bodhisattva to become a Buddha. And that's completely in line with Theravada. If someone decides to become a Bodhisattva, they want to become a Buddha, we have no objection. We would say you're probably not going to make it, but no objection to the concept. When it goes beyond that, and when the doctrine becomes this and this and this, everyone must become a Buddha is one of the very common doctrines. I don't believe that.
Bhante, here is the next question. Can AI tools, large language models like ChatGPT, etc., be trusted to give informed answers about meditation and Buddhist study?
So there are two issues with this, and I'll just keep this brief because obviously this is not a deeply interesting subject, though it is topical, right? Everyone's into this stuff. First, what you all know much better than I do is that it can be wrong. It can just be flat out wrong. So you get the information wrong, that's dangerous, right? That's not such a big problem with Dhamma as far as I've seen. It's actually pretty good. I'm surprised. Even Pali, it's quite incredible. But the second problem, and this is the more insidious one, and I'm not an expert on these things, but let me brush in broad strokes again. Broadly speaking, you're dealing with the wisdom of humanity. And we use the word wisdom kind of sarcastically, I guess you could say, because it's not really wisdom. Like when I say the wisdom of humanity, that should horrify you, right? That should, as Buddhists, make you think, oh, but in that case, when you put it like that, it's not so enticing or appealing. And that's the point. Is that when you get an answer back about the Dhamma, it's not from the Buddha. It's from Joe's Buddhist website or weblog, which, could be someone like me who's, by no means an authority on the Buddha's teaching. It could also be someone who was far removed from the Buddha than I am. So I guess the simplest way to put it is it's very much watered down, and I wouldn't rely on it to give you any great explanation of any Buddhist concept. If you want information from it, just take it with a grain of salt, obviously. Check your sources. I think the best thing it can do is point you in the right direction. What I've seen is you'll search for something, it'll give you an answer, and it'll give you sources. If it doesn't give you sources, you're on the wrong site. You're looking at the wrong one. But find one that gives you sources and go to those sources. That's great. Better than a search engine. it's understood what you've said. I mean, not really, but it's the algorithms are able to connect what you said to the information that you need in a way that search engines were never able to do. That's awesome. That's great. That's a very powerful tool. Of course, powerful tools are dangerous. So the third problem, I'm not going to get caught up in this, I promise. The third problem is the power. Power is intoxicating. And it's a big issue with every piece of technology since electricity and before electricity. Everything is, power is intoxicating. It makes you want to do more. It makes you want to get more. It makes you want to make more. It makes you want to get caught up in samsara. Knowledge that comes from an LLM is never going to bring you anywhere close to enlightenment, even if it is accurate. Because the Tipitaka itself is not going to bring you anywhere near enlightenment. You can read it 10 times over. It's not going to bring you anywhere near enlightenment itself. And it's not like you can read it and just expect it to somehow blossom into enlightenment. It's not really the case. This is why they emphasize connection with a teacher. But the real reason for having a teacher is not so much giving you the right information. It's about having the accountability to actually have to do meditation, actually have to do the work. Of course, being with a teacher, there's so much subtle nudging in the right direction that a good teacher does. It's not about what they say even. It's just about when they say it and when they say it and how it pushes you in the right direction. It's often just subtle nudging, which you don't get obviously from information and not from an LLM. That's all I have to say about that.
Bhante, the next question is, how can we develop the mind toward the end of rebirth without getting caught in vibhava tanha?
Well, I want to say you shouldn't really be focused on ending rebirth, but it's not really true. It's just that most people who say that are just disliking, are just triggered by the disliking of something, some experience. The difference is that eventually someone becomes tired of samsara. And this is where past life memories can be really helpful. And this is what Edit and others were alluding to. It's that it is possible that memories of past lives can make you weary of samsara. It's again, I don't think it is universal that just because you remember past lives, you're going to be weary of samsara. But it can happen if someone's in the right mood, has the right sort of guidance, and is in the right frame of mind. It can make you weary. I mean, people who are spiritually inclined, who are asking these questions, why is there suffering and what is the nature of suffering? People like the Bodhisattva who left home. When they start to remember past lives, it just broadens their horizons and puts things in perspective. And they have to ask themselves, why? Why be born again? When being born again just means being born again. And again and again and again. So vibhavatanha is when a person thinks about being reborn and thinks, oh, that's horrible. I'll have to go through all the terrible things in this life. Like imagine having to relive your childhood. For some people, that idea is just horrific. Imagine having to go through the teenage years, which are the most confusing and often torturous time. For some people, it was just hell on earth. Imagine having to go through all the trials and tribulations, all the stresses of divorce and bankruptcy and losing your job and losing your house and losing your car, losing your health and losing your youth and losing your life. All of these things horrify us, and they should. Reasonably, it's reasonable to be horrified by all of this, but that's not truly working towards freeing yourself from rebirth. It's this dispassion, this weariness. I mean, they're kind of related. You see, you can go from one to the other. So it is reasonable. It can be good, a good start to realize how horrifying this prospect is. But it's not what leads you to seek an end to rebirth. Not truly, because a person who is horrified by these things just comes back again in a different way. They're driven by their aversion. And the aversion drives them towards something else. But a person who is dispassionate is just tired of it. They're not going to fight against it. They're not going to get caught up in it. They're tired of the circus. They're tired of the whole fantasy. They're tired of even getting upset, even being afraid. They're tired of being afraid of birth, tired of being afraid of death. And it's that getting tired of it that the Buddha talks so much about, nibbida. When you get tired of it, then you're ready. Because that's the thing, that's what makes it so difficult. You can talk about these things, you can agree with the Buddha's teaching, you can say, yes, the Buddha was right. But if you're not tired of samsara, all the knowledge in the world isn't going to prevent you from chasing, grasping and clinging and being reborn. So mindfulness, that's what mindfulness does. You start to get tired because you see it more clearly. You see the process for what it is. Impermanent, unsatisfying, uncontrollable. Not worth clinging to. Anisito viharati, nachakinchi loke upadhyati.
Bhante, that was our last question for today, as we are out of time. Thank you for your time today, Bhante. Just want to give express my personal thanks to all the readers in the Discord and everyone in the audience, those of you on Discord and the audience on YouTube as well. Thank you everyone for this wholesome session today.
Thank you, Sibitsu, Dalauer, everybody behind the scenes who was helping with the session, questions, all the people who are reading, all of you who asked questions. If your questions didn't get answered, well, some questions we're not going to answer. Maybe they're not appropriate or that sort of thing, but otherwise you're welcome to try and ask them again if you feel like it is an important question that you need an answer to. You can also ask it on our Discord. There's lots of people answering people's questions there now. Just appreciate that you all took the time out of your lives, busy lives, struggling in samsara as human beings, taken time out of that busyness to do something different, do something above and beyond, right? So I was talking about Buddhism is above and beyond. You didn't need to be here. This isn't going to help you live your life as a human. It may help you get into heaven, but even that isn't the real reason. This is above and beyond, and you've done something above and beyond, which is encouraging, worth feeling good about. That you're not just a ordinary individual plodding along like a zombie. We've all done something. Well, we shouldn't feel proud or like conceited about it, but we can be confident and think, okay, I'm not useless, that's for sure. I've done something good. I've spent 2 hours, some of us, 2 hours here, engaged in good things. I want to appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this group and the opportunity that I've had to be able to. It's a very privileged position to be able to answer these questions. I try to give other people the opportunity. I tried to say, if someone else wants to chime in, you're all welcome to. If people want to answer questions or so on, I have no problem there. Obviously, I have certain experiences and expertise that makes my answers unique, and I know there's good there. But the privilege to be in this position is something humbling and something that I'm very grateful for. I'm grateful that you all are involved with this. I'm grateful for all the hard work that everyone here does, especially those people who practice mindfulness. It's hard work. It may seem very selfish, you're doing it for yourself, but I don't see it that way at all. You're the lifeline between Buddha's teaching and the world. People who practice mindfulness are providing the greatest service possible to the world, giving this doorway for other people to pick up and practice the teachings and the practice of mindfulness. So I want to appreciate mostly that in all of you, that you have this goodness, this greatness in your own interest in not only Buddhism, but the practice of the Buddha's teaching and the practice of mindfulness. So through the power of all that goodness, all the goodness that was performed on this occasion and every week, every occasion that we come together in this way, along with all the goodness that you have done in this life, and all the goodness that brought you here, just to be born as a human, all the goodness that is required to free yourselves from the lower realms, and be born in this privileged state among all animals, among all beings, be a human being. All of that goodness, along with the greatness of the Buddha, the greatness of the Dhamma, the greatness and power of the Sangha and the Triple Gem. May all of that protect you and keep you free from danger, free from pain, free from sorrow, free from enmity, free from calamity, and free from sickness, free from problems, and trials and tribulations. May you all live a long, healthy, happy life with the strength to deal with whatever challenges come your way. May you go on to happy places, being born only in places where you can continue to practice the Buddha's teaching. May your minds be firmly fixed and dedicated on becoming better, going above and beyond, learning more, perfecting your minds, cleansing your minds, and progressing on the path that the Buddha taught, leading to peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering through the path, fruition, and nibbana. Sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu.